Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving straight into a truly incredible historical analysis. The source material we're looking at paints this breathtakingly vivid picture of 17th century India, and it details the just extraordinary rise of the Maratha Empire. We are going to see how one historical figure didn't just win a few battles, but literally shifted the geography and the mindset of an entire subcontinent. It's an absolutely fascinating journey of strategy, resilience, and vision.
Okay, let's dive into this. The source structures this epic journey into 5 clear phases. First, the seed of Hindavi Swaraj. Second, courage, tactics, and early victories. Third, defying the Mughal Empire. Fourth, the sovereign Chhatrapati and administration. And finally, an unbreakable, enduring Maratha legacy.
So starting off with Section 1, the seed of Hindavi Swaraj, a light in the dark.
To really grasp the magnitude of this story, we have to look at the bleak historical reality right before Shivaji's birth. The analysis describes mid-17th century India as completely fractured. On one side, you have the oppressive reality under foreign sultanates, the Mughals up north, the Adil Shahis and Qutub Shahis down south. It was a landscape of destroyed agriculture, broken temples, and forced servitude, where local leaders were honestly just wasting their potential fighting each other. But then, on the other side, we see this striking, contrasting vision of Swarajya, a system emphasizing absolute self-rule, the strict protection of ordinary farmers, and an immense, almost unprecedented respect for women.
Now, this vision didn't just appear out of nowhere. Born in 1630 at Shivneri Fort, young Shivaji's worldview was shaped deeply by his mother, Jizabai. The source notes that, while his father was away fighting, his mother basically planted the seed of resistance, using the epic tales of the Ramayana and Mahabharata. And she wasn't just telling these stories to put him to sleep, she was using them to awaken his conscience. This all culminated in 1645. At just 15 or 16 years old, alongside his loyal friends, he took a blood oath at the hidden Rayeshwar temple to establish Hindavi Swaraj.
So how exactly does the source define this Swarajya? Well, it definitely wasn't just a land grab. It was the fundamental concept of absolute self-rule and indigenous sovereignty. The top priority was the protection of the land and its people. Shivaji realized super early on that they weren't born to serve foreign powers. The real goal was to revive the lost self-respect of the local population.
Moving right along to Section 2, Courage, Tactics, and Early Victories, Building the Foundation.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is seeing how a grand vision requires flawless execution. This is where we see Shivaji completely transform into a formidable tactician. To make up for his lack of a massive army or some huge treasury, he mastered guerrilla warfare. He partnered with the loyal Mughal youth. These were the sons of poor but incredibly fierce farmers. He used the rugged, treacherous geography of the Sahyadri Mountains to his absolute advantage. His tactics were lightning fast, strike and vanish. And crucially, and I love this detail from the source, he relied on an unbelievable espionage network led by Shivaji Nayak. We're talking about spies so skilled they could infiltrate enemy camps and identify exactly what they're having for dinner.
You know, this movement inspired a kind of fierce, absolute loyalty that is just incredibly rare. Our source shares the deeply emotional anecdote of Tanaji Malasare. Tasked with capturing the heavily guarded Singargurt fort, Tanaji actually postponed his own son's wedding to lead a daring midnight climb up a sheer cliff face. His forces did take the fort, but tragically, Tanaji was killed in combat. Shivaji Maharaj mourned him with these immortal words, "God Allah Pansinha Gela, the fort is won, but the lion is lost." It really proves that Swarajya was a cause people willingly gave their lives for.
Naturally, these early victories quickly drew the ire of much larger powers. The Sultanate sent a massive, frankly terrifying commander named Afzal Khan to crush Shivaji. But instead of meeting him out in an open field, Shivaji lured him to the dense foothills of Pratapgarh. Anticipating treachery during their so-called diplomatic embrace, Shivaji arrived wearing concealed armor called chilkhat and hid a tiny weapon known as wagnak, tiger claws, right in his hand. When the giant commander tried to stab him, the armor blocked it, and Shivaji neutralized the threat. The source neutrally highlights this, not just as a violent encounter, but as an absolute masterclass in strategic preparation.
All right, on to Section 3, Define the Mughal Empire. David versus Goliath.
Having shaken up the regional sultanates, the Maratha movement was now facing a completely different beast, 150,000. Just think about that number for a second.
That is the staggering number of soldiers the Mughal Emperor Aurangzeb sent to Pune under the command of Shaista Khan to crush this rebellion once and for all. Shaista Khan even occupied Shivaji's own childhood home, the Red Mahal. But Shivaji, he didn't panic. In an act of just incredible audacity, he and a team of just 400 handpicked men disguised themselves, infiltrated the heavily guarded camp in the dead of night, and attacked the Mahal. Shaista Khan barely escaped out of a window, losing 3 fingers to Shivaji's sword in the process. The psychological blow to that massive Mughal army of 150,000 was totally devastating.
And this brilliantly illustrates his next great trait: absolute calm under extreme pressure. Sometime later, under a treaty, Shivaji was brought to the Mughal court in Agra and practically placed under house arrest by Aurangzeb. Facing almost certain death, he devised a genius plan. Step 1. Feign a severe illness. Step 2. Begin sending massive baskets of sweets to the poor every single day as charity. Step 3. Once the guards grew lazy and stopped checking those baskets, hide inside them. Step 4. Escape right from under the emperor's nose. The source calls this, without exaggeration, one of the most thrilling escapes in modern world history. Which brings us to Section 4, the sovereign Chhatrapati and administration, beyond the battlefield.
Because, as we know, winning battles can carve out territory, but military victories alone do not make a nation. Legal and administrative frameworks do. Shivaji realized that to the rest of the world, and especially to the Mughals, he was still technically viewed as a rebel or a rogue landlord. To legitimize Swarajya, it needed formal recognition. Thus, in 1674, which is 8 years after that crazy Agra escape, he held an official coronation at Raigad Fort, overseen by the scholar Gagabhat. He assumed the title of Chhatrapati. The source emphasizes that this was a profoundly important moment, literally the rebirth of an independent native power in India after 300 years of foreign dominance.
And as a sovereign, his administration was surprisingly modern. He instituted the Ashtapadhan Mandal, which was a council of 8 ministers with clearly divided governance roles. He had the Peshwa for administration, the Amatya for finance, the Senapati for the military, and so on. He also entirely abolished the corrupt Jagirdari system, where lords just kept land revenues for themselves in favor of paying his ministers transparent, regular state salaries. This ensured their loyalty was to the state itself, not to their own personal fiefdoms.
He was also a visionary who looked way beyond the land. Observing European traders, he coined this brilliant phrase, Jame Vyasyat Balmev Tasya, he who owns the sea owns the power. Realizing India's vast coastline was totally unprotected, he essentially became the father of the Indian Navy. He built his own shipyards and constructed impregnable sea forts like Sindhudurg to defend against pirates and foreign navies. It's a timeless leadership lesson, really, recognizing your vulnerabilities before your enemies do.
The source also strongly highlights his ethical governance. His military code was incredibly strict. Any soldier who harmed a woman or a child would be beheaded, no exceptions. Armies were strictly forbidden from destroying farmers' crops during their campaigns. He also expanded his empire southward in what's known as the Dakshin Digvijay, uniting southern Hindu kingdoms and even fostering a unified front with his stepbrother Vyanka. So it wasn't just about conquest, it was really about the spread of a moral, protective state. Finally, we reach Section 5, an unbreakable, enduring Maratha legacy.
Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj passed away in 1680, but the true test of his Swarajya was what happened next, 120. Aurangzeb, thinking the mountain rat was finally gone, marched south with his massive army to wipe out the Marathas once and for all. But Shivaji's son, Shivaji Maharaj, stepped up to the plate. Over the next 9 years, Shivaji fought an astonishing 120 battles against the Mongols, the Siddhis, the Portuguese, and the British. The most incredible part of that stat? He didn't lose a single one of them. He fiercely defended the empire his father had built.
Eventually, though, Shivaji was captured through treachery. The source reports that Aurangzeb brutally tortured and executed him, thinking it would strike absolute fear into the hearts of the Marathas, but it completely backfired. Shivaji's sacrifice didn't cause fear, it ignited an absolute inferno. It transformed the Maratha cause from a king's war into a massive decentralized people's movement. Leaders like Rajaram and the brilliant tactician Maharani Tarabai took charge, effectively bleeding the Mughal supply lines dry.
27 grueling years. To put that into perspective, that is how long Aurangzeb spent living in tents in the south, trying to crush this resistance. It emptied his treasury and completely broke his army's morale. In 1707, he died in Ahmednagar, his dreams of conquest shattered, while the very Maratha forces he sought to destroy were actively preparing to march on Delhi.
So the crucial point is how the source captures this entire journey in a really beautiful metaphor: the seed versus the banyan tree. What started as a small, localized vision in the rough Sahyadri caves grew into a massive, sheltering empire that eventually spanned from Cuttack all the way to Attock. The legacy of Shivaji Maharaj didn't just end with lines on maps. It lived on as an ideology, directly inspiring future freedom fighters like Lokmanya Tilak and Subhash Chandra Bose centuries later.
I'm going to leave you with this final, provocative thought to ponder. How does a single oath, taken by a teenager in a hidden mountain temple, ultimately rewrite the geography of an entire subcontinent? As this explainer shows, history doesn't just belong to those with the biggest armies or the deepest treasuries. It belongs to those with immense willpower, a clear vision, and an unbreakable love for their land. Thank you so much for joining me on this incredible deep dive, and I highly encourage you to keep exploring the vast, fascinating legacy of Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj.